May ends in June. Ooh, that was a fail. Let's try this again. May ends in June. Send in the clowns. Bojo, you're up. As I said, May ends in June, and by May, all of us know at this point Theresa May. You can see the background, so you know we have hopped across the pond. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Welcome to the show. So let's hop across the pond and let's talk about what is taking place in the UK right now. As most of you know at this point, if anybody has been following the show, Theresa May is resigning. She's a lame duck prime minister. She leaves in June 7th, if I'm not mistaken. And there is a leadership contest that is vying for the crown, vying for the leadership of the Tory party, which will be the leadership of the United Kingdom. The politics that are taking place in the UK right now are utterly fascinating. This is not just politics within the context of a country or even within the context of a party. This is also the politics within the context of a larger governing body that the UK is interacting with in regards to a deal that these guys are trying to make in order to understand their relationship after the United Kingdom extricates itself from the European Union. And man, are the swords and knives out. So Theresa May ends June 7th. Now, I've always made the point that the Tory party is essentially the Democratic Party in the United States. They are the Conservative Party in the UK. They are essentially the Democratic Party here in the United States. Now, in all order, almost as if reality itself wanted to affirm how right I was, in the same way the Democratic Party has this absurd clown car of a leadership challenge where 20 people or more are vying for the crown to go against Donald Trump. You have 11 people currently. There may have been people that have jumped into the race within the time span to which I have looked, if so, forgive me. But up to this point, 11 people in the race vying for the crown. The person that people give the best odds to winning this is one Mr. Boris Johnson. Now, personally, I've been agnostic on Brexit, but I do think if there's a referendum, the referendum needs to be honored. Now, when David Cameron gave up the medal, Boris Johnson did not want to take that mantle. At this point, he wants it. Boris Johnson is probably, of all of the people that are running in the race, the most well-known, and it's probably the one that can bring people out to vote, which is kind of what I want to talk about. I want to have a conversation, not necessarily about the intricacies of the Tory bloodletting, but a little bit above that. Yes, I want to get into that, but I also want to take a step above that and talk about Brexit, European Union, Britain as a whole, and just kind of the events surrounding this and how this may, and I would even argue, has to play out. And why Boris Johnson has to be the choice if the Tory party wants to have any chance of this playing out with him retaining power. Right now, if there was a snap election, the Tory party would lose brutally. They lost 1,300 seats in the local elections. The Brexit party cleaned up. And yes, the Labour Party got dinged. The Brexit party cleaned up. The Tory party, if I'm not mistaken, was like in fourth place. They were relegated to a position that essentially these minor parties that oftentimes you don't even bring up was relegated to. Theresa May leaves on the 7th. Whoever takes her place has to deal with a broken parliament. Now, this is the key point. Regardless of who takes her place, Parliament is what Parliament is. The status of Parliament, the configuration of Parliament hasn't changed. The only thing that's changing is the leadership of that Parliament. The Tory party does not have a majority in Parliament. The Tory party uses the DUP to prop up the government itself. That has not changed. That is a key point. Boris Johnson, being the lead Brexiteer in this case, and the one that I would argue probably should get the nod, and has the best chance of getting the nod, Boris Johnson has said outright, look, a hard Brexit is on the table. Now, I would argue a hard Brexit has to be on the table. People dislike me for saying that. I've had people take a shot at me for saying that, I'm for Brexit. I don't quite understand what people are going through. It's not that. I am agnostic towards Brexit. It's just in negotiation, I don't understand how you take this notion that you walk off the table. That makes no sense to me. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Ultimately, this notion that you go into negotiation and you say, we're going to wrangle, but ultimately, I'm not leaving here without a deal. That is no place to be in any sort of negotiation. Hard Brexit has to be on the table just for the sake of the negotiation in and of itself. Whether or not that's what you shoot for, it's kind of besides the point. It has to be on the table. So any of the Brexiteers that say otherwise, I dislike them. I don't think it makes quite much sense. At the end of the day, you could come into this thing of, look, hard Brexit off the table, and the European Union gives you the exact deal that Theresa May had. What are you going to do? Are you going to sign it or are you going to walk? You just said hard Brexit is off the table. It makes no sense. Now, but Parliament says that's not an option. Parliament says there is no majority here for hard Brexit. This is the dirty secret. Hard Brexit is not something you need to quite do. Hard Brexit is something that happens when you don't do anything. Ultimately, on October 31st, if you have a deal, then you can avert a hard Brexit. If you do not have a deal, you will not avert a hard Brexit. I hope that's clear. You have to vote on something in order to avoid a hard Brexit. If Bojo gets it, what is Bojo to do? Bojo doesn't have the parliament that he needs in order to enforce a hard Brexit, so what is Bojo going to do? Bojo has literally no legitimacy from the standpoint of the public. Zero. Bojo will have to call a snap election. Bojo will not have a choice but to call a snap election. The catch here is, yes, you've taken power, that is true, but you can't enforce your will into the political space. In fact, of the matter is, you need the public to co-sign anything you are going to do, seeing as you got into power, not because the public chose it. Meaning the public put Theresa May in believing Theresa May was going to be the person that delivered Brexit. They did not put Boris Johnson in with the thought that it was going to be a Boris Johnson Brexit. There's a difference in those things. You are going to have to go back to the public to co-sign whatever you're trying to do with regards to Brexit in the negotiation. In fact, you don't have a mandate. You don't have anything from the standpoint of the public that would even allow you to talk to Brussels to try to get those changes in effect. Yes, from the technical aspects of government, you have power from the standpoint of getting the public's approval of what you personally are going to do, where the public says, yes, this is exactly what we want. This is what we're going to co-sign, at the very least by majority, even if you don't necessarily get everyone. Yes. You don't even have that. My point is this. For all of those people who are pushing for Corbyn, this is the best outcome that you could have possibly gotten. It's a question whether or not Jeremy Corbyn can beat Boris Johnson in an election. But that question, without an election, it's like if that election never took place, that question never is even raised. We wanted this notion of a snap election while Theresa May was in power. When if Boris Johnson takes power, I don't know how Boris Johnson wields any level of power without having an election to co-sign whatever Boris Johnson wants to do. And again, he doesn't have the numbers in Parliament to do what he wants to do one way or the other. An election is necessary. I want to point to the people just so we can give an idea of who so far is in the election, the contenders that are up for it. Bojo, Boris Johnson, womanizer and outright liar, Dominic Raab, Michael Gove, Andrea Leadsom, that's the one that resigned from Theresa May's cabinet, kind of in this kind of, and put this letter on Twitter of not believing that May could deliver. Some people said that sealed May's fate. Jeremy Hunt makes the point that there is no, there won't be a hard Brexit. You don't have the numbers for it. He's right that you don't have the numbers currently. Matt Hancock, no idea who that is. Esther McVeigh, the hardest Brexit position of the lot, holding out against Theresa May's deal throughout various votes, says The Guardian. Let's see. Sajid Javid, Rory Stewart, Kit Malthus. Keep an eye on this spot. Oh, and by the way, despite the leadership change, meaning despite the fact that the leadership itself may change, and even if that leadership change goes to Boris Johnson, somebody who's, again, put out that he's okay with the hard Brexit position if he can't get what he wants from the standpoint of the European Union. The European Union has raised an eyebrow, and for the most part has said, nothing changes for my part. We've negotiated a deal with your country, and that's the deal that we're going to get. And we will give you a little bit more clarity from the standpoint of how we're going to, the exit. But nothing changes. Meaning, it doesn't matter who your government changes to. Even if you change to a Boris Johnson, nothing changes on our part. Now, that could be posturing, but up to this point, that posturing hasn't shown to be posturing. That seemed to be their position. And again, it could still be posturing from the standpoint that Theresa May couldn't deliver one way or the other. So there's no point in them moving in their position. Meaning, even if we move and betray a position that we currently have, you couldn't deliver the votes one way or the other. So it's no point in us moving. Now, with the Boris Johnson, it may be different. And to be honest, it may even be different from the standpoint of what Boris Johnson can whip his members into accepting. The country voted to leave. And a Remainer got the ball. And that Remainer did what a Remainer was going to do. Yeah. Pay attention to this space, because I will be keeping track of what is taking place in the UK on this. This is fascinating politics. And I don't ignore the fact that there are consequences for the Brexit. It's just, there was a referendum. Clyde Illusion. Boris Johnson was one of the most prominent figures of the official Brexit campaign in 2016. Yes, with betting markets suggesting that 40% implied probability of winning the top job. Yes, he was. But if you remember Clyde, he declined taking that job when the Brexit campaign finished. Meaning, when it came out that Brexit was going to go through, the public says, yes, we want to leave. Boris Johnson, Cameron resigned. Cameron was like, I'm not going to touch this. And Cameron resigned. He gave this weepy thing in Parliament, almost crying in Parliament. The person who was expected to take the job back then was Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson decided not to take that job. Theresa May ends up taking the job. Theresa May assigned Boris Johnson in her cabinet because of that. If you remember, part of the reason that she put Boris Johnson in her cabinet was because Boris Johnson was so prominent in the Brexit campaign in the first place. So now he wants the job. We'll see. 40% chance. That's what they say. Brexiteer Dominique Raab. Yeah, Dominique Raab, I think they're going with the second chance, or second to the best chance. We'll see, man. We'll see. This is fascinating politics. If Boris Johnson takes that job, and Boris Johnson says, look, I'm not going to accept this deal. This deal is an outright betrayal. He's, saying Britain will be in servitude. And by the way, it's not just right-wingers. Varoufakis had made this argument saying that it was a deal that a country only accepts in surrender at war. Like think of the imagery that we're using with these words. A deal that is like a Versailles Treaty. It's like a country that's been beaten and then signs over in sovereignty to another country. That is extraordinary words. And so, this is the language that's being used. And so Boris Johnson gets in and says, I'm not accepting that. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has apparently agreed to a second referendum. Bad move. Bad move. I know there's a lot of Blairites in the party that have been going at Jeremy Corbyn. But it's a betrayal of the democratic order itself. I mean, come on, let's be honest. You had a lot of Blairites that after the referendum took place, they didn't care that the public said they wanted to leave. Their focus was, these guys were racist, and these guys were this, and these guys were that, and these guys took money, and this and that. It wasn't the referendum itself. All of this keeps getting ignored with the fact that the public decided that they wanted to leave. Now, whatever that means, you can make up a Brexit that doesn't necessarily entirely leave in the way that people might say this full hard Brexit. But let's just be earnest that the public did decide that it wanted to do that. And that's not happened. That hasn't happened. I'm almost this kind of ideologically wedded to this notion that these people voted on this. It bothers me. Brexit won't happen if Boris is held in fraud. Patrick Seguin, hold in fraud? Where are they going to hold him in fraud for? I mean, I know these guys are going after him, but come on. The party decided last year that a referendum on a leave deal could be necessary. Yes, that is true. But let's just be honest that the referendum on a leave deal is meant in order to prevent the leaving in the first place. Like, there's been a certain dishonesty that I think elements of the left, the Blairites, have been using when they've been talking about their strategy of trying to slow it down and then eventually stop it. They would never say, we're trying to stop Brexit. That's too honest. What they will say is, let's get a vote on the final deal. Now, the public will look at that and say, well, that's logical. That makes sense. But, what's the deal? What the intricacies of the deal? What are you going to focus on when you're talking about the deal? The good parts or the bad parts? And like everything else, most things are kind of a little bit of both. Like, I guess my point is, the entire point of this is to slow down any notion of Brexit. That's the point. That is totally the point. That's why Corbyn has confirmed the media are making nonsense of it by pretending not to understand. Jamarl actually got me interested in British politics. It's fascinating. It's entirely fascinating. Look, to make my point here, Corbyn agrees with me. How do I know Corbyn agrees with me? Because he's been sheepish about this in their entire way. Even though people under him have been making this point, Corbyn has been extremely sheepish and going this route because he knows, he gets it, he understands. The moment that the public makes a vote, the last thing you want to do is pretend that the public's vote didn't take place. It completely undermines any level of trust in a democratic order. If you say, we're going to have a referendum, we're a democratic country, these are our ideals, these are the things that we stand for, we are a democratic order, and we're going to have a referendum, and we're going to have this large show of democracy, and all of these people are going to come out, and they're going to pull the lever, they're going to push their fingers, and we're going to stick with the results of the referendum. And then to turn around and say, yeah, no, this was too hard. We're going to stop this. There's some people that are okay with that. But what does it mean for the country itself? From any notion of a democratic order of things? What does it mean for this veneer of democracy when push comes to shove, it's whisk away? I have extreme qualms with that. But we'll see. That said, do not misunderstand me. A no-deal Brexit would hurt. In the short term, it would hurt. Britain, countries have gone through extraordinary difficulties at times, and they will be okay. But yeah, in the short term, it'll hurt. Country voted to leave, man. I mean, don't have any illusions about what that means, though. My issue with the right-wingers that are pushing this stuff in a way that, that is somewhat of a lunacy. They're acting as if they can essentially just fall out of the European Union without there being any consequences to the country. That is nonsense. Does it mean that if you guys can come to some kind of honest deal where both sides kind of make out in this in decent terms? Yeah, you can do that. But the question is that going to take place with the people at the helm? Under Corbyn? Yes. Under Johnson? No, I don't believe that at all. But I do at the very least believe that if the country voted to leave, you should give it to somebody who actually has the balls to leave. And by the way, that's not a joke on gender or anything else. I know use that term often. It's just making the point that they gave the ball to a Remainer. They gave it to a Remainer. And, that's not what the country wanted, per se. All right, let's see. Somebody puts in that super chat. Non-binding referendum. Uh-oh. Technically, it wasn't binding, and every single economic consequence of leaving is horrific to Britain. I disagree. Technically, yes. But come on. Come on. Yes, that's my argument. My argument is, come on. It is impossible. It is impossible. Whether it's whether it's technically binding or not it doesn't matter. It is impossible for you as a prime minister and as a party to say, let's have a referendum and we're going to go see what the public wants, and the public tells you what it wants and you pretend as if that didn't exist. What are the consequences of that? Come on. And you're going to say that's a technically not. Yes, technically, in the legal sense, it's non-binding. But I made the point that laws don't exist. Whether it's non-binding or not, you're stuck in this point where you gave the public a question. And the ideals of your particular country say that you're a democratic society. In this grand show of democracy, you gave them a choice. How do you ignore the fact that you gave them a choice? I guess my point is, whether it's technically binding or not is almost irrelevant to the process. You gave them a choice in this large, grand way where all of these people got involved. If I'm not mistaken, the largest election in Britain. I don't think you can run away from that. I understand it's not binding, but by virtue of what it is, makes it to some degree binding. Just saying. Just saying. And by the way, do you honestly really want to have another referendum? What if the referendum comes back and say leave again? Are you going to try to have another one to see if, I don't like this continuous referendums. If you put on the referendum at this point, leave, stay, or accept this particular declaration. And again, this even goes into what do you put on the referendum at that point? Uh-oh. I feel like somebody's going to try to take the piss out of me. I'm okay with this. I can defend this position. Non-binding referendum. You ask the public what it wants and then ignore it. That seems exactly like what the DNC did in 2016. It is what the DNC did in 2016. Well, not exactly like. Theirs was more like, we have a primary, and in that primary, we're going to shirk one of the guys, and we're going to lie to you about the fact that we're shirking one of the guys. So we're being fair and impartial, and we're not going to do anything wrong, and we're running these primary contests, and oh my God, they're in the bag for Hillary Clinton. It's that. It's a little bit different. But yeah, they had it in the bag for one of the other members. And man, it's funny. Jordan Chariton sent me an article that he wrote that showed that the financial coordinator, the DNC, was essentially a fan of the more corporate Democrats. And they asked him, hey, did you contribute to Joe Biden? No comment. No comment. But apparently he contributed to some of the other corporate Democrats that were in the race and went on a tirade against Bernie Sanders. Jordan's point was, how can we trust you to be honest in this contest if this guy seems to be, a fan of one of the candidates or other candidates other than Sanders? I don't think Sanders has any illusions that he's swimming in an arena of sharks. So, you high-functioning hall monitors of the progressive halls of intelligentsia. You can't make me read a book on the UK politics. I'm too lazy. Yes, you have a higher IQ than me, but I still scored 179 on my LSAT. All right. I don't know what's going on here. So I'm going to leave this because we're deviating. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.